Now that you've completed your abstract object drawings for Milestone 1, you're going to choose one of your 6 refined drawings, and you're going to work that up into a final logo design. The final logo design is going to be completed in Illustrator using the same techniques that we used for Milestone 2 of Project 1. One thing you're going to do is you're going to add type. So this is going to be a logo for a company. And in the student illustrations that I'm showing you, I have a winery and a wine bar. And something to notice is that the logo image area conforms to the proportions of the rectangles that you use to create Milestone 1. But you can modify this in order to make a more visually dynamic and interesting logo. So for example, on the logo on the left-hand side with the wine glass is actually breaking the bounds of this rectangle. So that's something that you can explore if that makes sense for your design. Also, the student added some liquid wine to the glass, and that makes for an interesting negative space and gives the logo a little bit more weight and visual impact than if this was an empty glass. And also it makes sense, right? It's a winery and you want to have a glass filled with wine rather than an empty glass. Now the one on the right-hand side, which is a wine bar, instead of a wine glass, the student used a wine bottle. And you can see that this logo is based on the refined drawing right above it. And you can see that the positive, negative, abstract bottle shape is confined to this rectangle. But for the final design, in order to just make a bit more interesting visual, the student decided that it would be a good idea to break out of that rectangular shape and go a little bit beyond it. And so this makes for a really a more dynamic and visually interesting logo. And it is still using positive and negative. So when I say positive and negative, what I mean is black and white. So these logos need to be black and white only, no gray. This is something that for logo design you want the graphic symbol of the logo to work in just positive, negative, black and white. Later you can apply colors to it. So for our project, we're just going to be sticking with black and white, positive, negative, space only. But if you're going to put this into a portfolio, then outside of our class, you might want to add colors or modify the logo using grayscale or colors in some way. Now, another addition to this logo is the type, the name of the wine bar. And you can see if you compare these two logos, the one on the left and the one on the right, both of them use type. They treat type in a bit different way. So the one on the left, the student decided to put the name of the company in another box above the drawing, above the wine glass abstraction, and that's perfectly acceptable, and that works. The reason she decided to do that is because she wanted to maximize the rectangle part of the illustration by breaking this glass out. And if she was to try to fit the type down in here, like in between the glass and the border, the type would be too small. It would be hard to read. I mean, you have to remember that logos, a lot of times they're applied to really small things, and you don't want your type to get too small. So it made sense to add an extra element up here for which she could place her type. Now in this design on the right, the student placed the type within the box, and that works out well. I think that she could have made the type a little bit larger because wine bar is pretty small and skinny, and it's getting a little bit lost at a smaller size like this. I mean, maybe she could have taken this type and placed it below the box. um, or she could have placed it over here. So there are lots of options with type. And that's something as you develop these logos in Illustrator and start working with type, you're going to have to consider these different options. And I think that it's a good idea to explore various possibilities. Try different things, place your type in different areas, use different fonts, try different sizes and proportions and weights of fonts, and see what works. But it's always a good idea to look at your logo and to look at your type, kind of zoom out on your Illustrator document so that you can see what they look like at a small size and see if your type does remain readable at a size like this. All right, so these are student examples from past classes. And there's also, if I scroll up here, there's some other examples. These are from the textbook, which this project is adapted from. So these were not completed in my classes, but these are good examples as well. So what this shows is you had 3 different types of boxes that you were to use in order to develop your abstract drawings. You had 2 different rectangles of different dimensions, and then you had a square. And this shows logos that were created using each one of those different proportions and oriented different ways as well. So here's on the left-hand side a rectangle that's longer than it is high, and that works really well for this particular shape, the nozzle of a hose. And also, this student decided to add a type of negative shape here, which is representing the spray of water, and then the name of the company is within that. Think about these logos being your abstracted object, black and white, positive and negative, but then ultimately you want to make these interesting logos, so you can add things if it makes sense. In this case, it kind of made for an interesting logo, and it communicates something about what this object is doing, that it's, or what the company does, is it, sprays water, cares for the lawn. This one, wonderfully whipped, the center one. Well, so this whisk shape, or this whisk object that's been abstracted, is shown vertically, so it makes sense to orient your rectangle vertically. And the student decided that it would be a good idea to add a negative or black square in the back to give this some visual interest and focus attention on the whisk shape. So this entire thing would be considered the logo, the black and white rectangle and the type within it. And this one on the right, this was developed from a square, one of the square abstractions, and then the name of the company was placed outside of that. So in total, this logo is kind of more of a rectangle, but it's based on one of the square-shaped abstractions. Again, look at how the students found different solutions for the type. All right, so these are some good examples, and ultimately what you want to do is choose the most interesting refined drawing of an abstraction that communicates the idea of what your company does. And if I could just notice something or point something out as I'm talking about this, look at the different refined drawings and how there's some other ones that the student didn't choose. And I think the ones on the right-hand side, they don't have as strong of an area of negative space as the ones on the left-hand side, so they're a little bit weaker. So they make just a little bit weaker of a visual than the ones on the left because there's more negative space. There's more of a, interesting negative shape in here. It has more visual impact, that black color. But also, the fact that the student chose one that's at a diagonal, which diagonal shows, it suggests motion. And also, it's a diagonal that implies that this bottle is pouring out. It's almost as if a waiter is pouring the bottle and Maybe the student could have explored like something as if some wine was coming out of here. So that's a much more makes much more sense for the final logo than this one that's completely horizontal, as if it's just kind of laying on a table, like rolling on a table. It's not really pouring out. Or the one that's held, shown straight up and down or pointing straight down, which would almost be like, like a ketchup bottle or something like that. All right, so those are all things for you to think about. You use your refined drawings, pick the best. If you, if you have to develop another one or go a little bit farther in order to get an abstraction that you can then use as a template to create your Illustrator drawing, then that would be something that you want to do.